Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Been a week since we last spoke. Last week I was speaking to you from sunny Thailand, but I'm now back in Dubai for a few more days before I return home. I hope you and yours are well. It's been a heck of a week, lots happening. But the main thing, of course, has been the leadership competition. I don't call it a contest because it's more of a competition than a contest. And as you know, a lot of those that follow me on my blogs, I invited the three contestants to a hustings here. And I'm happy to say that one of the contestants, hopefuls, candidates, whatever you want to say, has agreed. But there's two of them that haven't, and I won't name. You can work out who you think it is. You know, they all said they were unity candidates. That was my reason for inviting them all to do a hustings here on Prism. So if you're all unity candidates, come on, show your unity. Come to the Independence podcast with the biggest viewers and the biggest reach. And so far, only one of them, the candidates, has agreed to do it. So I would implore the other two to tell us, because I've got to say, from another point of view, I'm keeping out of a lot of the discussion that's going on online, both on Twitter and in the blogosphere. I can be writing a few, but I'm hanging back because I want to stay as neutral as possible, but I'm not prepared to stay out too long. So I've politely and invited you. If you don't wish to do it, then please at least have the courtesy to tell me you've no intention of doing it. And I know the rules state that all three must do it or there can be no hustings. So if you're not going to do it, common manners, bit of decency. I was polite enough to ask you and I ask you politely. So politely, if you're not going to do it, let's hear about it. But anyway, we've got lots to discuss today, and my panelists will do most of the discussing, I'm sure. And I am joined from over there in North Dakota by the old Coatbridge Cavalier himself. Mr. Boswell, welcome back. We missed you last week.
Yeah, sorry about that, Rod.
Please tell me that's not an American orange jumpsuit and you're in a state penitentiary or something.
Guantanamo Bay. Yeah, just been moved there. Well, it's just a matter of time, let's be honest. Given
you're cut in that orange suit, I'm beginning to think, what's happened to your film here?
No, what happened last week, I was at an all-you-can-eat and critically drink ice hockey match on the Friday night. I was supposed to go up at 5 a.m. to do the Prism, and I got kind of carried away. Not with the eating, because it was popcorn and hot dogs, but the drinking was loads of beer, and it was a long, long evening. So sorry about that.
I'm afraid I'll have to report you to HR. You could have to face
fair
a
enough. And I think I deserve a damn good spanking for it.
Yeah, yes. Well, I'm sure you'll enjoy that. They were also down there in the borders, our wonderful Dr. Yvonne Ridley. Yvonne, my friend, how are you?
I'm fine and looking forward to today's show. I'm very curious about who the two are who don't want to take part in the hustings, but you mentioned unity and politeness, and let's face it, since the race has started, unity and politeness has been in the distance. You can tell it's because people are determined that there's going to be a crucifixion. It's getting quite hostile, in fact.
I'm sure we'll be discussing
the religious theme.
Yes, I'm sure we'll be discussing it in great depth. And to make up our little panel today, we're joined by, of course, from the Clackmannan's top citizen, our Eva. Eva, how are you, my friend?
In good order, Roddy, thanks. Having had an inspirational week in Clackmannanshire in the fight for truth and justice, punctuated, of course, by periods of being glued to the telly and glued to Twitter to see what's happening next in the political sphere. Exciting times indeed.
Oh, indeed. But I firstly got to start with some news. A by-election, the result came through on Friday. And it was quite an interesting result. up there in Aberdeen, Charlie Abel, for the Alba party, doubled the vote, beat the Greens. Seems to be progress moving along there for the Alba party. The SNP, big chunk, lost 10.8%, I believe. Labour up 8.2%. Greens down. So it would seem that we're getting a lot of the votes from the Greens party and the SNP are heading over to the Alba party. So things are moving there. It's only a by-election, and it's only a council by-election, and so, but it's a trend that's showing, and so the outcome of this election campaign for the SNP is vital, and it's obviously what we're going to discuss. I have to quickly, and I've got to just check my notes here on one of the endorsements that go out, of course. What the payroll are saying is not what the members or the public are saying. But there was one where Tommy Sheppard, and if I can find it, I'll get Techie to put it up, is where he said, you know, the SNP grassroots need freshness and new ideas, which is why I'm sticking with Humza, which is the status quo candidate. And I'm not attacking that or Humza, I'm just saying, he is the status quo. He's already said he will question the Section 35 in the Supreme Court. He will go ahead with the GRR. He doesn't see much, you know, point in changing anything Nicola's done because she was perfect. So kind of Tommy Sheppard's statement, Phil, didn't sort of ring true, did it? You're not looking for freshness of ideas and enthusing your grassroots by status quo.
No, and I'll come on to that when we discuss Humza and why he is not the new path that we need to take, but very much the old, well-trodden and very well managed by the establishment path. Now, what Tommy's, I like Tommy. I do like Tommy as an individual, and he wasn't treated well by Nicola, which the Nicola cabal, which is a plus as far as I'm concerned. However, what this smacks of, this is how politics works. If there are new candidates, then for his backing, a deal would be cut with Humza and Humza's group that will give Tommy a role. I'm not saying Tommy doesn't deserve it, but by selling out effectively the independence cause by backing Humza, not good enough, Tommy, for your own self-gain. No, not good enough. So no, I'm openly critical of Tommy for this move, and it's for his own personal gain, and he's lying. Tommy, you're lying, mate, and I'm disappointed in you for that.
It is, Yvonne. I agree with Tommy's point of view that we need freshness of ideas, because actually, we need new ideas, we need a new direction, because, you know, as I've just mentioned at the opening part, losing 10% in a by-election, some of the opinion polls and independence numbers down, there has to be a fresh approach, because if you just keep going the same way you're going, it's not a winning formula anymore.
No, well, I have to agree with Phil. You know, I like Tommy Sheppard. He first came to my attention because he was really supportive of the Palestinian cause, and I like that he was prepared to fight for peace and justice in that volatile arena. But I think he's bottled it. You know, he's following Humza Yousaf, who, I know I upset you last week when I said I quite like Humza. I've been battered by loads of people for saying that.
Good.
But I have to say, I was really surprised by Tommy Sheppard. You know, he's supposed to be a firebrand. He's supposed to, you know, speak with passion and from the heart. And yet he sounded very much like part of the establishment. You know, find your backbone, Bonnie lad, and stand up. And, you know, just we need something fresh. And I know that you made reference to Charlie Abel's performance in the Aberdeen by-election, and I think that that's worth revisiting. Alapa is obviously on the right trajectory from the way that it's increased, you know, from a point of 0, it's on the way up. The SNP, looking at the figures, is on the way down. And what I found astonishing is that the Green vote had virtually disappeared. Now, there's got to be a lot of different reasons for that, and I'm sure Phil, being the oil man, will come in on this. But it sort of shows you where people are with fossil fuels and the Green Party when you see the Green vote collapse in Aberdeen. So I thought there was a lot to read into that by-election, but I think Charlie Abel did very well coming from a point of 0.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't the full figures and seen them yet, but it sounds to me like that's, you're talking about if that was reflected it, then, for example, at the Holyrood election, the Alba Party would be getting 8 or 9 seats in the list, which could be the balance of power. It could be the balance of power, and it's only going to grow. But the other things that have come out this week on this, Eva, when our First Minister resigned, or sort of resigned last week, she said she didn't want to get involved and she would take a back seat. However, she hoped that her successor would keep the Greens in government and coalition with the SNP. But that was her. She wasn't going to get in again. And then this week, despicably, and Tech, if you could put it up, she intervened quite dramatically and I think disgustingly by saying that Kate Forbes wasn't suitable to be a leader of a progressive party or leader of the SNP, in effect trashing her. But what I find most disgusting and ridiculous about this, if she, her views have been well known, Eva, and her religious backing and all that, we'll come on to that in a second. But Nicola Sturgeon knew that when she gave her the second highest office in the Scottish Parliament. So if she wasn't fit enough, in her opinion, why did she give her the job of Cabinet Secretary for Finance? But she's now saying, well, she can't be, she's not suitable to be First Minister. The first thing is she was wrong to get involved. And why did she make her Finance Secretary?
Quite an interesting set of circumstances there, Roddy, and it brings to mind the difficulty that Nicola Sturgeon's Scottish Government seems to have had in respect of all of the protected characteristics and the Equality Act of 2010 and its implications, because, of course, religious beliefs are a protected characteristic. Kate Forbes and everybody else in the UK is entitled to a religious belief. And that's exactly what Kate had expressed. Now, it doesn't matter whether you or I agree or disagree with her. Those are her beliefs. They are her private personal opinion. And she made it abundantly clear that that's what she was expressing, simply a personal opinion. She at no stage indicated any desire or intention to seek to overturn any existing law. But where Miss Sturgeon would be unhappy with her is that obviously, as we know, Miss Forbes would not be likely to proceed to debate or to fight the Section 35. So I think that what you've got here is some element of disingenuousness on the part of the First Minister, because, as you've said, she appointed Kate Forbes to get her out of a howk at a really difficult time when the budget was about to be delivered and presented at the Scottish Holyrood. I think that Miss Forbes had only a few hours' notice after Nicola Sturgeon was obliged to suspend Derek Mackay because of issues surrounding his conduct. Now, that's a whole different story. But if Kate Forbes was good enough then to step into the breach at very minimal notice and to deliver a budget in a way which at the time all commentators across the political spectrum said she'd done professionally, especially given the short notice, she had been succinct, but clearly very much in charge of her brief, albeit that she was landed right in it. If she was good enough to do that then, and her religious beliefs mattered not a jot, then they don't matter now either. But you see that the interesting aspect of this too is to consider that Kate Forbes wasn't an MSP at the time of the vote in respect of same-sex marriage. Ash Regan wasn't an MSP either, so neither of them voted. But there remain within the Scottish Parliament several MSPs who voted against that legislation. Nothing has been or is being said about their beliefs. So why does belief and why does religion only become significant when one is in opposition to the chosen, anointed continuity candidate? And his record in relation to voting on same-sex marriage seems about to continue to be scrutinised, especially because of comment made by Alec Neil. So
yeah, we've got it there. Techie, can you put it up while he was talking? Can you put up the Alec Neil's comment?
If you want to unpick all of this, we have a set of circumstances which actually bears no relation to the narration or narrative given by the First Minister. The reality is that it's Humza Yousaf who should be answering awkward questions in respect of belief and motivation, because there is evidence to suggest that he asked for and got an easy way out, didn't vote on the final vote on the equal marriage legislation, but was able to take that out and could have voted however he wished, because unlike the vote on the GRR bill, the vote for the equal marriage legislation was a conscience vote, as detailed by Alex Salmond, who had no need, no desire, and nothing to gain from whipping MSPs, although obviously at the end of last year, Nicola Sturgeon had to whip hers relative to gender reform, which was clearly very unpopular with the electorate. And I suspect, had she had a conscience open vote unwhipped on that, the result might have been quite different than we saw at the end of the day.
I mean, you're absolutely, because I remember going back, we've talked about it often, where you and I, Phil, were on the opposite sides of the NATO debate. And at the time, I was against it. I remained against it, and I voted at the recent Alba Party conference on a winning side this time, that Scotland wouldn't join NATO. But no one suggested that I should leave the SNP because I disagreed in a debate and continued to say, well, next time, you know, if it ever comes up again. And I remember saying it, if it comes up again, I'll vote against it and try and see it kicked out, just for this gender stuff. But here's the other thing. On what I was discussing with Eva there about Nicola Sturgeon's appalling intervention to trash Kate Forbes, along with a lot of other terrible people that said terrible things. But what's even worse is that her husband is counting the votes and running this competition. He has now got a conflict of interest. He should have recused himself from the entire procedure. This is not democratic, and it stinks a wee bit to me, Phil.
It definitely does, and it's one rule for one and another for someone else, for everyone else. You know, what it tells us is there are overall massive changes required to the Scottish Government, the SNP and the Greens, that is required here. And I hope we need to go back on, obviously, to discuss the leadership contest and the candidates, because I've got something to say about all of them, but and I'm sure we all do. But I wonder sometimes, am I being overly dramatic by using the betrayed word or betrayal to describe those who sold us out? And I don't think so. But unlike those in the woke and Nicola's brigade, I've got an open mind to such matters, which are complex and barely visible to the public conscience, given the fact that the mainstream media will not tell you what's going on. And bear in mind, given our own people with all our collective frailties, and I include myself in that and my imperfections, that we seek to persuade the Scottish people and to encourage, and by that I mean instilling courage to stand up and take control of our own destiny as a sovereign people. So we need the courage to stand up to what's happening right now and what they're doing. And I know many of the people we are discussing, I know the people we're discussing, many of the people we're discussing, the system and how it works better than most. Why? Not because I'm the smartest guy, because I'm certainly not that, but because I'm smart enough, just smart enough to figure it out. And I've had the very unique opportunity to operate at the very heart of this particular darkness. So I know these people have sold us out primarily because they're on a good wicket, as the English say, a very good wicket. For a red coat, for an ex-councillor or a council worker. In fact, for the majority of SNP MPs, MSPs, and particularly the Greens, they're on dream money and a daily ego massage thrown in. And if you understand how the political system works in the UK, you will know that it's designed to turn your head. It's designed to onboard you, to influence and intimidate you into playing by the rules, their rules, not ours. And that it provides you with such lavish a lifestyle. So to a degree, from a human point, it's understandable that humans succumb to this most human of frailties. But enough of the excuses. We need to understand why the pressures that people have brought to bear on the current corrupted SNP, and that has resulted in Nicola's removal as a failed First Minister, must now intensify, not fade away. And it needs to grow into a massive clear out from positions of power of the corrupted and the corruptors. And as I stated last time, and Ash Regan, funny enough, has since pointed out, the independence movement needs to be returned to the possession of the people of Scotland. And given the SNP's position in that movement, that means the corrupted and the corruptors within the SNP need to be removed. There's a famous Carl Jung saying, if the path before you is clear, you're probably on someone else's. And that is the case, very much the case with your man Humza Useless. Because the reason he is the anointed one, because he's following on exactly on the path that Nicola put him on. He doesn't have the gumption, and we'll talk about him as an individual later on. But that was the case with Nicola. But it's not the case with Ash Regan and clearly Kate Forbes. And I say possibly Kate Forbes because we also need to be wary of the management of perceptions, i.e. the obstacles that politicians face can be real or illusionary. It's part of the game of the management of perceptions. The right for Kate to hold her Christian views, I will defend, as it's the right to be heard, to speak freely, that has been the core factor in the civilization of Western culture, and that is under attack and it must be defended at all costs. Nicola was on the establishment's chosen path. For her, no obstacles or challenges until she ran out of her usefulness, of course, and that came when we, the people, mobilised against her. And now the establishment seek to pull the old stunt of changing the face of politics, but not the establishment serving unionist infrastructure they have built within the SNP and the Greens and the Scottish Government. So get rid of the Greens. Not one of these bozos is worthy to lead Scotland's people. Andy Whiteman, possibly the exception and worthy, but he decides to quit even though he lost money in doing so. But the infrastructure, critical infrastructure, my last point on this, that needs to be corrected, needs to be removed from the SNP government include Murray Foote, the Daily Record author of The Vow, SNP media chief, Peter Morrell, Liz Lloyd, Mary Hunter, the entire SNP headquarters staff, and every MP or MSD that supports this betrayal. Again, not too strong a word, of Indy by 2050. Stuart McDonald, Angus Robertson, out damn spots, for you betray the will of the people and are responsible for placing us, the Yes movement, in the weakened position we are now in by your betrayal and your self-serving subservience. And the list goes on.
Brilliant that, but in answer to my question, should Peter Morrell recuse himself from this entire procedure?
Aye, he should be resigning like the rest of them. And that's the reason
he shouldn't be
why
near
he
this
should be
election,
resigning.
Especially with his wife's intervention. He should not be in any way, shape or form. We were talking about the Greens, Yvonne, And they say, no, it's up to the SNP to choose the leader. However, if they choose Kate Forbes or Ash Regan, we're pulling out. The tail is very much trying to wag the dog, is it not?
Absolutely. You obviously watched the same interview that I did with that little pipsqueak.
Duracell man.
What a little weasel he is.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, imagine somebody who was nowhere politically a couple of years ago is now telling the SNP membership, vote for who you want as long as it's Humza Yousaf.
Yep.
It's like the old story about Henry Ford when he said everybody could have a car and they could have any colour of their choice as long as it was black.
Black. Yeah.
This is what this little pipsqueak is saying to the SNP. Anybody you want, vote for. This is democracy. This is what we believe in, as long as it's Humza Yousaf. And, you know, I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt who said that women are like tea bags and you can't tell how strong they are until you plunge them in hot water. Well, I have to say, Ash Regan, she came out fighting when she turned round and said that Peter Murrell should go. And you could almost hear the gasps in Hollywood. You know, this is somebody who is stating the obvious. And Kate Forbes as well, another incredibly strong woman. And why there was so much surprise when she came out with her religious views. You'd think somebody had just said the Pope's a Catholic. Of course, she'll have her beliefs, and I respect her for bringing it right out into the open. But I'm wondering if she's actually, what motivated her to do that, and if she is going onto the high moral ground, which she obviously feels fully entitled and experienced to do, and she's challenging the others to follow her. Well, can they go onto the high moral ground as well? I'm dancing round my words here very, very carefully, Roddy, because I'm shocked what I've learned on Twitter. And there are a few people whose behaviour is a resignation issue from a moral compass point of view. What I've learned recently, because of course, you know, I kept saying, what's gone on at the Balmoral Hotel? OMG. I wish I could tell you, but Prism listeners inundated my, when I invited them to DM and tell me, and I'm quite shocked at, and I have to say that Holyrood is more like the last days of the Roman flaming empire with all the shenanigans that's been going on and the STIs and all this sort of thing that's running around Holyrood and being passed freely on by people who should know better. It's incredible, the scandals. And this is why I bemoan the loss of the News of the World. I used to work for it. There's enough work going on in Holyrood to keep a News of the World reporter or team going for the next 6 months, because it's really one of the most promiscuous environments where politicians who should know better have got the morals of alley cats. And maybe that's why Kate Forbes has decided or chosen to do God this week, because she, of course, along with Ash Regan, will know where all the bodies are buried. They will be privy to all the scandals, all the little sexual peccadillos, who's been with who and who's been doing what. And I have to say that I think that this is going to be really dirty campaign. And if I were the three candidates, the last place I'd want to be is on a panel with you throwing the questions, Roddy. I'd be calling for my divorce lawyer and my libel lawyer and my defamation lawyer and any other lawyer that I could think of to be sitting next to me, advising me on how to answer the questions. And the Scottish media can sense this, and they're starting to pick away. It's only going to be a matter of time before we get lurid front page headlines.
Yeah.
And
after Phil's confession at the start of this programme, the news world was still going. They could have been in North Dakota at the hockey match and maybe picked up some spicy stuff. I don't know. I want to put in a couple of viewers' questions. Our new questions through a Scottish Prism. Eva, there's one. Both questions actually are worth putting up. And if I get taken to put up, the first one is from a Robert Slavin in Coatbridge, is the first one. And it's a panel to discuss for 2 days in a row. Humza Yousaf declared that there isn't a majority support for independence, and according to him, there's no quick fix. And if he gets selected as the First Minister, we can forget a true indie campaign, it would seem, till 2050. And another one from question from Jock Wisher, which it sort of fits in with that. And he says that if Mr. Useless, as he calls him, gets the gig, is Indy 10 years away at best? And if Ash wins, how does that start the purge of the SNP and moral cabal and get democracy back to the membership? So it's a 2-in-1, Eva. The fact that someone who's going for the leadership of the Independence Party is saying, well, there's no... So that means that, you know, they were telling us, he was saying how great his predecessor, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, was. And then in the next breath, he's saying, well, actually, we're no further forward. We're not ready for independence. It's almost like the Tommy Shepherd thing. We need fresh ideas, but we're keeping the same. They keep contradicting themselves.
Well,
it's not a good thing for a leader of an independence party to be saying, well, we're not ready for it.
Well, the SNP and the Greens need to decide where their priorities lie. Are they there for party interests or for the interests of the country and the cause of independence? So in that regard, I would provide some reassurance to Ross Greer. I'm no as green as I'm cabbage looking, and I know the terms of the Scotland Act. And if the members of the SNP elect either Kate Forbes or Ash Regan and the Greens aren't happy and they won't support the election of one of these women as the First Minister, that could be a positive development for the cause of Scottish independence, because it can lead, after a period of 28 days without a First Minister, to a Scottish election. And how good would that be to actually have that Scottish election this year? It perhaps could be time to take place on the 19th of October and be the independence election. So, Ross Greer, be careful what you wish for, because you might have some unintended consequences.
Yeah.
In relation to...
Sorry to interrupt you, Eva, but couldn't it just go the other way? The Greens being what the Greens are, they could switch sides and help elect a unionist First Minister. They could.
Sorry, Roddy, I couldn't keep it past them long enough to do that justice. You can't trust a Green. People are waking up to that. The Scottish Greens and the Greens of England and Wales are two very different parties. There are people in the Green Party in England and Wales that are very principled and have had difficulties with the hierarchy of the party, because some of those have been infected with some of the madness that you've seen up here. But I think, again, the result in the Dyce by-election shows that the polish is worn off the Greens. People are waking up to the fact that their agenda is not really an agenda for Scotland, whether it's in relation to the betrayal of the North Sea and the assets there, where you've got the ridiculous position where we've to stop extracting oil and gas from the North Sea and instead we'll import hydrocarbons from elsewhere in the world. I mean, have you ever heard anything so stupid? On the one hand, and on the other, all this gender reform stuff, which we know is hugely unpopular. But to go back to Robert's position in relation to Humza, how on earth and why on earth would somebody aspiring to lead the main party of Scottish independence, a party with a very long tradition of fighting for independence at every turn, actually be daft enough to say that there is not currently a majority in favour of independence, and therefore we need to take our time, build the case, and it's a while away. What we know, and we know this from 2014, is that you have to give people a date. You have to give them something to aim for. You have to give them a goal. You have to have an objective in sight. And that's why 19 October this year was and is so very important. You cannot keep taking people up the hill and back down again. And that's happened so many times in the last, 8 years. We cannot have that with another leader of the government. We need to have a leader of the country who will motivate the entire Yes movement to mobilise and to keep up the fight. The Scotland 2050, I think, was a quote from Stuart MacDonald, who said he wanted to have the leadership candidates providing a vision of Scotland 2050. We all know what Scotland 2050 will look like if we're independent. We'll all be better off. It'll not be a land of milk and honey, but it will not be the country that we are now, suffering from Tory austerity, poverty amidst plenty. We're bound to have a national energy company by then. We're bound to be in a position where we're self-sufficient on energy, self-sufficient on almost all foodstuffs, where our kids have got to be better educated. Life expectancy will be increasing, not reducing as it is in some places. And I hope to God we've tackled poverty, drugs, addictions, alcoholism, and all the wants of this country have got to be addressed with independence. So we can all create our own vision of Scotland 2050, but we're not waiting until 2050 to be independent. That's the point. But if it's up to Humza, he's going to sit and twiddle his thumbs and say, well, we're not quite there yet, so I'm not really sure what to do. Is it a Section 30? Is it a de facto referendum? Instead of saying, collapse the Parliament, 19 October, that's the day, we're doing it then, and to that end, we'll have an independence convention, and in fact, we'll call it tomorrow, let's get together, and we'll sit come the weekend. That's the strategy that's needed, to give people back power and hope, and a recognition that independence actually is the will of the majority, and hell meant what any jangled, jumbled polls have had to say, because most of them in recent weeks have been fiddled as well, as fine we know.
Yeah, well, we've seen it, talking of polls, but another one, Phil, which this, I don't know if you saw the article here in North Dakota, I'll get Techie to put it up in a second. But not only was it Ross Greer saying, well, you can vote for who you like as long as it's Humza, but it turns out that a senior source in the SNP has informed through the Daily Record, and going back to our Murray Foot, the man, it seems since he arrived at the SNP, we spend more time talking to the Daily Record, certainly than they ever do to the pro-independence new media. But they've said that even if the membership vote, let's say they give 90% of their votes to Ash Regan or Kate Forbes, that no, Kate Forbes, no, we've decided that the MSPs won't vote for you as First Minister. They will go against the will and the wishes of the membership of the SNP. It beggars belief, though.
Well, yes and no. Sadly, it doesn't beggar belief right now with the crop of MPs and MSPs that we have. It should beggar belief. What we should have is MSPs and MPs that stand up for what is right and for what their constituents actually want. But since they figured out which side their bread's buttered and jammed on in numerous layers, they have turned away from the public and are just going along with the rest of the crowd. I'm not surprised at this, sadly. And Nicola pushing this mantra that she also supports this. I mean, between the lines or as a headline, it doesn't matter. She's clearly behind this. She's clearly part of it, and she's denying democracy. That's why I said earlier it was so important to get a massive clear out and keep the pressure on these shysters. This is just the first step, getting rid of Nicola. We, the people, have to take control, and we, the people, for the people. This, you know, if Humza gets this, he'll continue what Nicola did, which is, you know, the waiting for at least 10 years for India, the 2050 nonsense, and certainly freedom of speech will be completely removed. Your right to speak freely, as they're trying to do to Kate, as they're trying to shut down the will of the people. The MPs and MSPs have an obligation to represent their constituents. And if they fail to do so, we, the people, must remove them. And I keep saying that's an Americanism. I'm reminded of one of the most famous sayings of Thomas Jefferson was that our liberty is dependent upon freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost. And that's as true today as it's ever been, all across the world, especially, you know, what's been perpetrated against our press. I know we've been talking, and particularly Yvonne is an expert in this, on what the press was, and will probably be in future. But what we're doing right now against truth speakers, the persecution of truth speakers, the primary of which is Julian Assange, and note the SNP's silence on this critical issue. The freedom of speech is critical. Now, how does this key right affect Scotland? Well, you get the situations that we're facing. You're being told who our SNPs and MPs will and will not vote for. You're not given freedom of speech. You're not given the right to choose. The whole system's being manipulated and played, and it's the establishment behind it, and we need to get rid of the shysters I spoke about earlier. I mean, firstly, and why it's so important as well, firstly, it's the right with which we protect all other rights, and there can be no compromise on this. Look at what the SNP have become. What damage cancel culture has done. Deplatforming and denying freedom of speech. It must be defeated, and now is the time when they're on the back foot. I mean, we now have the opportunity for change, currently presented with the collapse of the cabal headed by Nicola Sturgeon, and she and the other traitors to the principle of self-determination by the Scottish people, by the people, for the people, must prevail, and those that stand in our way must be pushed aside or at least removed from their positions of power and influence within our institutions. That's how it's done. They control our institutions. The establishment controls us through what used to be our institutions, and we need to wrestle control back from the shysters and, more importantly, their puppet masters. Look how wokeism has been called out all around the world. The New Zealand PM, Jacinda, Trudeau under huge pressure, and Nicola's downfall. I mean, there's a classic one over here I saw. It's called Trapped in a Logic Trap. Rubin Report. Not my favourite programme, but he does speak the truth from time to time. The title of Nicola Sturgeon being caught out by logic is "Watch the moment this politician realises she's trapped in a logic trap." And as he points out, it's why these radicals, be it left or right, want censorship. And only by avoiding scrutiny can they escape justice, and the justice that ordinarily flows from investigation and being called to account, which is why your plan to get all of these would-be candidates onto PRISM was never going to work, because they're avoiding the truth.
The ones that are saying that they won't vote for Kate if she is, or they don't want Ash and blah, blah, blah. But if you could put it up, John, the SNP Code of Conduct, if I can just read it out, that every member has a responsibility not to discriminate in his or her conduct on the ground of race, colour, gender, religious belief or non-belief or sexual orientation. Now, those who are now all attacking Kate on her religion, or Ash Regan for her belief of she's opposed to GRA, they're breaking their own SNP Code of Conduct, and no disciplinary actions happen about them. And yet we've got the First Minister saying, or the present First Minister saying, well, I don't think Kate Forbes is a suitable candidate. Yvonne, I mean, the SNP were doing as well, saying, well, we'll just not bother with an election. We'll just appoint Humza, because that's what we're going to do anyway. It stinks as if they're trying to rig it.
There's an arrogance in the SNP, and it showed when I was watching FMQs the other day, when Douglas Ross tried to undermine Humza Yousaf and his campaign. And she is not supposed to endorse any candidate. She's supposed to let the members have a free vote. And yet her vociferous support of Humza Yousaf in the chambers at Holyrood told the world, this is my choice, this is my man, and I want him to follow me. Now, I was quite surprised at that, at the way that she vehemently defended him, and it was quite obvious. And then I know the game, you know, I can smell cabbage boiling in Manchester, and her people were briefing against Ash Regan and Kate Forbes. And it was obvious, you know, you can spot a planted story, and they were planted all over the tabloids. And you can see that this is going to be, as I say, a very dirty campaign. But those two female candidates, they can make it dirtier because they know where the bodies are buried, who's buried them, and why they've been buried. And I would, oh gosh, it would be great to see them on a hustings in prison, because, you know, we could get down and dirty and get to the bottom of this, this cabal, which has been festering away. And I would also like to know what's going on with our friend, the Chief Constable, who apparently has visited Sturgeon in recent days. I'd like to know what's going on there. He's now resigning. You know, why? Why is he resigning? And you know, there's a lot to come out there as well. And I just hope that when they pick a new chief constable, they don't go fishing in that slimy well of the Metropolitan Police, because they have done in the past, and we don't want anybody from the Met coming up here running Police Scotland. No. That would make things worse. But I'm going off on a tangent. What I'm saying is Nicola Sturgeon has broken the rules. She is backing Humza Yousaf, and she's making no bones about it. And she is still running the show. And I think that that we do need a new and fresh era. Having her sitting on the back benches is not going to be healthy for democracy when her cabal is still in operation. No, and who knows, she might do a Boris Johnson and become the comeback kid and come back into Holyrood after enough time has elapsed and all the bodies are buried for good and can't resurface again.
Yeah, it's true, Eva. We can't. And Techie, if you could get the video prepared, there was a very telling video. Now, in my professional career, I did an awful lot of courses on body language as part of my my professional life, and I watched the body language of this. And if we just watch here. Be quiet, you silly little boy. I'm talking. Don't talk to me when I'm talking. And his watches his head goes down and everything. She doesn't let her be quiet. And he's just like, this is the guy that's going to lead us to independence. I mean, you don't have to be a body language expert to see who's in charge of that. And the content of it, be quiet. And we need a warrior. We need a warrior, and that's why I think Ash Regan and Kate are the warriors we need. That doesn't look like a leader to me. What do you think? He'll be getting operated from behind.
The word that immediately sprang to mind, rightly or wrongly, was henpecked. And been...
Oh, I know about that.
Maybe he's been offered a position. He's in the limelight as the continuity candidate because other potential continuity candidates have had to take a back seat for reasons known only to themselves and on which we better not speculate.
Not at the moment.
But it wouldn't be too difficult to work out what some of them will be, especially if there are connections with the unexpected resignation of the Chief Constable and other matters that are obviously the subject of hot gossip across social media. It's highly unfortunate, though, that we seem to have, I suppose, a continuing split within the independence movement and the SNP in Holyrood and the SNP in Westminster, and that those candidates who are calling for unity within the independence movement are themselves, in essence, being targeted. I mean, you've seen the stories to the effect that because Kirk Torrance, formerly of Alba, is assisting and helping to run Ash Regan's campaign, that somehow this is Alex Salmond getting back into the SNP by the back door. How utterly ridiculous can you be? This is about independence. Kirk Torrance did a great job for the SNP, good job for Plaid Cymru, good job for Alba, and in Ash Regan's words, she's decided to employ the person that she thinks has the best skills suited to the task that she wants him to conduct. You've also seen people saying, oh, well, that's fine now, Alba will just go back and join the SNP. But, you know, I really must stress, we need to have two strong independent supporting parties so that we can cover with independence-minded, committed people, both the constituency vote and the list vote for any forthcoming Holyrood election, as well as in relation to Westminster. Scotland benefits when there are multiple parties promoting independence. That's actually the converse of that is why Better Together did so well in 2014, because Tory and Labour were able to set aside their differences against a common opponent. So independentistas have to learn that lesson and do the same.
Yeah.
But
the same thing on that topic, Eva, the same people who were very critical of Kirk, who you pointed out was one of the best strategists the SNP ever had, between like 2010 and 2015, their peak time, he was the main strategist. They were very silent when Nicola Sturgeon brought in the author of The Vow, that lifelong British Labour, British Unionist Murray Foote. And it was from that point on, when he came in, that suddenly we've got troll accounts and we've got the new independence media being attacked. They were all very silent about him being brought in. He should be persona non grata. Part of Phil's clear out.
Been silent about that. And if you look at the polls have either been static or they've moved very little in terms of the SNP's popularity throughout the whole period of time that Murray Foote has been their advisor. So, you know, I don't think he'll be getting any productivity bonuses.
No. But, all the polls that are happening on social media, Phil, are pointing to Ash Regan mainly, but also Kate Forbes. You know, between the two of them, Holmes is not at the races. The ordinary members and the grassroots and the voters are saying, we want Ash Regan. Some are wanting Kate Forbes. None of them are wanting. The only one was the poll in the National, which at one point had 600,000 votes for a paper with a turnover of 9,000 readers. And overnight they get 300,000 votes. No, I'm surprised Mr. Putin didn't get the blame of it. But it was Humza was in third place in that particular poll, and overnight he shot up because he got about 350,000 votes overnight. It was ridiculous.
Yes, and it comes down to the case of who counts the votes that matters. As Stalin famously said, it doesn't matter what the people vote, but who counts that matters. So,
as we discussed, Morell's going to be counting the votes.
Well, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of what we're discussing here in the leadership contest. The reason that the people are looking more at certainly Ash and Kate is that they've noticed that they have spines. They actually have some gumption about them, and particularly with Ash Regan, who's willing to stand up for her principles. Yeah. Only now that the leadership race has begun has Kate, and it takes courage. She stood up for her beliefs, and I doff my cap to her for that. But she was nowhere to be seen when we were taking on Nicola, the cabal, and the establishment on GRR. she avoided the vote. So, you know, you're a wee bit late to the party, Kate, but nonetheless, I applaud you for standing up for your principles and beliefs. Back to Hamza. The reason we know he's not the guy, the grassroots people know this, is because he's not a man of the people, nor is he a unity candidate, as I know very well, and he professes to be. He's a privileged, touchy grammar boy, which in itself must not preclude him from anything. But the image presented as a man of the people, he definitely is not. He's also not a leader. You saw that in what you've just. It was so clear. Not just you don't need to be a psychologist to understand his body language, but just look at his record. And he'll do what he's told by the same people that controlled Nicola, and he cannot be trusted by the people of Scotland. That fact is not up for debate. Now, it's my opinion, and there's evidence he may have, i.e., the severely worrying rumours around his, how could you say this, proclivity to corruptive politicking. Though in fairness, this remains unconfirmed in the public domain. However, that is not the case in the private domain. As for evidence, again, look at the actions, not his words. We did join in with the latest and most obvious indicator that our SNP politicians have been corrupted by supporting the delay on independence. All who support India in 2050 need to be removed from positions of power and influence immediately. Why? Well, it's our movement. Remember that? We put them there to deliver our independence, and they are now corrupted by the establishment and happy to proceed in very comfortable, highly paid positions that most of them would never attain in the real world. Remember, I've been there and experienced it. The TV appearances, the reporters and lobbyists' attention, the privilege you're given and the respect you're given, most of the time unjustifiably. But really what I would point to is look at what Carlton Jock did. Another of his excellent articles, right? Absolutely brilliant. He titled it, it was he researches things as Wings does. You know, and we try to do. So he's very credible. The title is in the decade, it's a long one, in the decade since Humza Yousaf entered Holyrood, he has established himself as the Forrest Gump of Scottish politics, surfacing at a department every time it was bedevilled by controversy, misfortune or error. Now, that's what it says. Now, that's a bit harsh, I think, on Forrest Gump, who was a good guy, who was honest and did well. That is the complete opposite of Humza. But we understand the analogy. But quoted in there, and there's some bullet points here I would want to point out. Minister for Transport and Islands, 18th of May 2016. He was the centre of controversy and public criticism over the poor performance of ScotRail, with its trains facing severe delays, cancellations, and overcrowded, and admitted he didn't know anything about his brief. Mick Whelan of ASLEF described Humza's response to the rail crisis as pathetic. Then appointed Cabinet Secretary, it just gets better and better, for Justice on the 26th of June 2018 without holding the mandatory law degree. Disgraceful. Hate crime bill was his first flagship bill. It's a disaster, fraught with problems, virtually unenforceable, yet absolutely wide open for abuse and the curtailment of freedom of speech, something SNP veteran Jim Sillars described this bill as one of the most pernicious and dangerous pieces of legislation ever produced by any government in modern times in any part of the United Kingdom. Now, I see we're kind of going on for time. You go through every single appointment of Humza Yousaf and you very, very quickly see that this guy is not capable. And he says he's been in every position and therefore he's the man for the role. Nonsense. The guy is the worst choice for this role. He's the last person the independence movement want heading up ostensibly the Yes movement, which is the leader of the SNP. That's the role they currently hold. So no, naughty Humza. You're a bad choice.
The only one of the candidates who's mentioned at a constitutional convention has been Ash Regan. I haven't heard anyone else doing it. She's taken a great guy with Kirk. You know, we need independence more than ever, Yvonne, because, and to move on, because, I mean, this week, I think, summed it up, was the supermarkets throughout the United Kingdom are without vegetables. I mean, there's enough vegetables in Westminster, but that's not the type the Eddle. This, I mean, it's just, it's ridiculous. But what really got to me, Yvonne, was the BBC and Channel 4 and STV and Sky saying, yeah, it's a weather problem throughout Europe. Instead of saying it's Brexit and we're screwed, they won't even tell the truth. You know, let them eat turnips. So what happened? Today we ran out of turnips. If ever we needed to get out of the Union, we're getting sick, we're starving. The people can't even get fresh vegetables in the United Kingdom. We've got to get out of this place. Sounds like a good song, doesn't it? We gonna get more than ever, Yvonne.
Yeah, I mean, you just couldn't make it up. And there's the Prism dog kicking off again.
It's Prism. We need a dog barking instead of just Phil barking.
One of the things that has puzzled me, this and it clearly irritates Humza, is this desire by the media to go back 10 years to the single-sex vote, or the mixed marriage vote, same-sex marriage vote. Sorry.
There you go, calm down.
Got it there in the end. And he is saying that he had an appointment in his diary and he couldn't break it. But I happen to vaguely remember that he came under quite considerable pressure in the Muslim community, which, you know, has really supported him in the past. And some of the elders in the community expressed concern about the whole concept of same marriages. And it's something that concerns all the monolithic faiths, the Jews, the Muslims, and the Christians. And, you know, I'm a Muslim, and I seem to remember that he does come under pressure from the Muslim community. You know, he is their local MP, although he lives in Fife, I think, but he's the Glasgow MP for Pollokshield. And, you know, he really needs to decide where he is. He's either a Muslim and uses his faith and gets voted and elected because of his faith, or he is this secular minister who, well, he's not what he seems. And, you know, he needs to try and work out. I mean, he must look at Kate Forbes with envy because she says, you know, I am a Christian, here I am, this is what I believe, but I will respect the wishes of the majority and the legislation which has gone through already. Although, having said that, she could have killed the GRR bill in its tracks if she had used her vote, which she said she couldn't because she was on maternity leave. Rubbish. You could have stepped up to the plate. So, bit of a slap there for Kate Forbes. But, you know, if you're going to use your faith as an election device, then at least Humza be consistent. And he's not being consistent.
No, I defend his right to be a Muslim. I defend Kate's right for her. I'm personally an atheist, an absolute heathen. I don't believe in it. I think it's nonsense. I believe in science. But I defend their right. And I think it's disgusting if anyone uses their faith against any candidate of any party. It doesn't work for me. And it goes back to the whole GRR thing. You know, I'm saying you want to be religious, be as religious as you like. Just don't expect me to join in. Same as you want to be a woman at the weekend, pal. Knock yourself out, but just don't ask me to say, yeah, you're a bird, because you're no, because you've got all the undercarriage. We've overshot the mark, Eva, as always. So I know a lot of our viewers will be quite happy. We've got a couple of minutes on. It's certainly a question I want to get to you all before I go. And it is again, on religion a wee bit. Shamima Begum, the young girl at 15, who was groomed, let's be fair, she was groomed by ISIS and went over to the war in Syria. We know the tragic life she had. I don't know, it was 2 or 3 babies she lost as a baby. She's got 1 child. They've removed her citizenship. Let's be blunt about it, because her skin is not white. If her name had been Sue Ellen and she had blue eyes and blonde hair, they would never have taken her citizenship off, and she's lost her appeal. And I'm really uncomfortable with that. I just think it's so wrong. You're a legal person. What do you think?
I'm also very uncomfortable about it. And I do wonder how racist the motivation for the decision actually is. I would probably compare and contrast that with the British soldiers who have been mercenaries and gone and fought abroad and come back to the UK without any kind of sanction whatsoever. This girl did very stupid things. She was involved with a murderous regime or organisation, but she was 15 years old. And we have this debate in Scotland often now about the age of capacity or the age of majority or the age of culpability or legal or criminal responsibility. And what we recognise in Scotland is that a youngster's brain does not mature until sometimes the age of 25. So if that's right, then we're penalising this girl, who's obviously now an adult, but we're penalising her for decisions she made and experiences she suffered when she was a child. There's no 2 ways about that. And, you know, we consider ourselves to be a civilised United Kingdom, and we berate and we criticise other countries in the world where they have, for example, child soldiers, or where they put on trial and sentence to death youngsters who committed crimes when they were children, but they stay in death row and they're executed when they're adults, and we say how wrong that is. And I fail to see the difference here. So I'm ashamed that we've got this decision. I think it's a wrong one, and that I stress is not to excuse what Miss Begum did or the people that she surrounded herself with, but we have to contextualise it. Can I go slightly backwards as well, Roddy, to something that's equally important? When you were talking about Humza Yousaf, he is the MSP for Glasgow Pollock. He lives in Dundee. His wife is a councillor on Dundee City Council. And earlier this week, Dundee City Council passed their budget, and they refused to guarantee funding for Sistema Orchestra, which is the orchestra for children in effect imported from Venezuela. It's a music scheme that transforms children's lives and expectations. Dundee City Council couldn't find the money to fund them for another year. If we were independent, and if Humza Yousaf and the people around about him had promoted independence, those children could have had their money for their orchestra. So I would like to think that around the dinner table tonight, Humza Yousaf and his wife are talking about where they're going to find the money to fund that orchestra in Dundee and other children's orchestras throughout Scotland.
Yeah, well, on that just point, she's a councillor, his wife's a councillor, he's an MSP, cabinet minister, running for FM, but he's living in Dundee, not in his constituency. He's like, well, I'm a councillor. So again, it shows to me that when the women come along, they tell him what to do. That's one. I just like to finish off the show, folks, who go well over our time. On Shamima Begum, whether it's Ash Regan or Kate Forbes that will lead us to independence, could I ask you, as one of your first acts, is to offer Shamima Scottish citizenship and bring the girl home to the, at least north of the country where all her family are. She deserves that. She was a child, and I would like to hope that we as Scots and good people, remembering they were all Jack Thompson's bairns, that she would get a passport from us. On that happy note, my dear friends, another week's gone. It's flown in. We're, as I say, way over our time. Techie will be giving us dokey for misbehaving. Thank you very much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as we've enjoyed talking to you. Keep the questions coming, keep the faith, and for all, I know there's an awful lot of our SNP viewers out there, you know, speak to the candidates. I'm not going to say which one, you can try and work out yourself which one's agreed to do it, but speak to them and say, come on, we want to hear what you've got to say. Well, until we see you soon, which will be next week, you now take care. God bless.
Bye.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.